I'd like to thank Lauren Schmitt for joining us today. She's formerly the news director of KMUD and Redwood, and then she's just recently started with KPFA in Berkeley. And so she's hit the ground running and she's doing working on news there, and she's collaborating with us at Pacifica to as we're building our what we're calling as community report at the moment. And she's going to talk to us today about having a newsroom without a news director and what resources you can turn to. So, with that, Lauren, I'm going to turn it over to you and say thank you. We're so glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you all so much. It's an honor to be joining you all. As Stephanie mentioned, I was previously the news director at KMUD Community Radio. Nat Cardos, who is here, is now in that seat. Thank you for holding it down, Nat. As they also know, creating news in a small, rural, underfunded community can be a challenge. But I think it's a challenge all of us, a part of the Pacifica affiliates, are really wanting to rise to this occasion, especially now. Um, in recent talks with Ursula, Lisa, and Stephanie, we're all coming together to figure out how, especially the sister stations, like the flagship stations of Pacifica, how we can utilize our resources to ensure that all of our affiliates have news, timely information to keep their listeners informed, especially with the attacks we're seeing on community media. The dissolving of CPB has kind of lit a fire under my butt. And I really wanted to speak to the affiliates across the country and see what the needs are, and how we can continue to support. And from my experience being in a small, scrappy newsroom, kind of wanted to share some of the tools and the tricks of the trade that I learned to make a newscast. At KMUD, we make a daily 30-minute newscast Monday through Friday here at, and 30-minute public affairs every Tuesday as well. Don't forget that. And then at KPFA, we make a week long. So Monday to Sunday, we have a newscast. Monday through Friday, it is an hour long, and each Sunday it is 30 minutes long. All of those air, all seven air at 6 o'clock. And we also do multiple headline reports at 7, 7:30, 8 a.m., 10 a.m., noon, and 4 p.m. Those are in Pacific times. Fun update, and we'll kind of get into it here in a bit in my slideshow I have for you. We are starting to upload some of our morning headline summary so that members of the affiliates can grab that and air that um, every day as needed. We're doing a 5-minute roundup of the top stories of the day, obviously with an emphasis on social justice and peace. A little bit of a different angle than some of the national legacy outlets, if you will. But that's what makes us Pacifica. And we really want to stick to that brand when we're making the news. So if it's all good with you, Stephanie, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just kind of go through some of these slides. I will say, if at any point someone has a question, please do not be shy. I really want this to be more of a conversation. I truly want to learn as much from you all as hopefully you're going to be learning from me. So do not.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I believe I am sharing my screen.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. Let me go back actually. Oops, wrong way. Let's see here. 1 second. Let me pull this up. Out of how many years in the pandemic, and we're still trying to dial in the Zoom call. Okay.
There it
All right.
is.
Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, we are going to discuss how to make news on a budget or without a news director. I'm sure I don't have to tell you all, but I truly believe local news is incredibly important. Some of those reasons: building trust, credibility in the community, there was a recent survey. It was actually announced at the NFCB, which was among also a lot of the NPR affiliate stations. But we have data that shows people trust community radio above any other outlet. That is incredible. I felt a little bad for the NPR colleagues in the room, but the community outlets, the folks that make up Pacifica, we are the community. People know they can trust us. We are accountable. We are accessible. And that really gives us an advantage in speaking to our audience and sharing the critical information, especially when it's needed the most. We've had really difficult times, and between the pandemic, politics, etc. I mean, we really at KMUD were able to build an audience of folks from across the political spectrum. I mean, we had Republicans calling us saying they were reaching out to try to keep our CPB funding. It's pretty incredible, and it's because we are the voice of the community. Um, we cover issues overlooked by larger outlets. Right now, one of our top stories is tracking the global summoned flotilla. We're really not seeing that on other outlets, and this is major, and it's been a ripple effect, right? We're seeing dock workers threaten to shut down activities if the flotilla is threatened. This is a major international story we're seeing not really get the coverage we believe it deserves. And again, that's why Pacifica is so awesome. We support local democracy, city council races, supervisorial races, the small community elections that don't get coverage otherwise. Community resilience. We'll get a little bit into that. I have a special section about emergency preparedness because if anyone takes anything away today, I really, really, really want to drive home that while you want to build your news, I do think one of the first steps folks should take is really looking at the station's emergency preparedness, whether that's preparing your station physically or preparing your on-air response. All right. We kind of went through this. We don't really need to double back. But what I've been hearing from everybody is that everyone that's attending this is interested in bolstering their news and either has a news committee, a news director, or none of the above and is seeking to. So I think this will kind of share again some of these, like, I don't want to say shortcuts, but tools that are available that for the most part are free of charge. I have included some other services that do, can cost anywhere from $1,000 to $20,000, which you probably won't go for that one. But just to show you kind of what's available as far as where you can grab content from. And then at the end, we can double back to other needs, right? As we mentioned, the sister stations of Pacifica here in California, San Francisco, LA, Houston, New York, DC, and Randy, I know in Florida, we've all really we've been having weekly meetings trying to rise to the occasion, figuring out how we can get more news on audio port and more news on your airwaves to support. So, news can look different for your station compared to, let's say, like here we have KCBS, right? That's they're covering like these national headlines, where for the local outlets, who is your audience, right? What's the difference between corporate radio, community, public radio, and community radio, right? And it really comes down to the localization. Community radio, like your friends, your neighbors, that's your audience. You're speaking to them directly. So while some stations, you don't really hear some of those like hyper local news stories or emergencies. And that's really where I think small outlets can rise to the occasion, right? Is there a road that's closed? Is there an emergency school closure because of a blizzard? Other emergencies, outages, hazardous spills, all of these little things that you can share with your listeners that brings this news. And I kind of took that model at KMUD, and I was inspired because when my family first moved to North Carolina, we were in a really rural area, and we had a hurricane coming, and my mom, the power was out, and my mom went to the radio to try to find information because when she lived in a bigger city, there was information readily available. In the smaller community, she turned to the radio and there was nothing. And I just remember like the panic my mom had. And it's something we hear first responders say all the time, like, oh, if you don't have power, go to the radio. But what if we're not prepared? What if, and sometimes we don't see that communication with first responders, and I'll get to that later in this presentation. But I think really when the communities depend on us the most, right? People think radio is antiquated or they're only listening in their car. Well, during an emergency, they're going to be listening. So rising to that moment to meet the needs of your community, again, roads, school closures, other emergencies, and giving voice to your community. What are these hyper local issues that are impacting them? We had an issue. One of my first like big stories was about how our recycling center was no longer recycling, and it was a really big deal in our community. So covering little things like that. Stories don't have to be long. I need to take that own advice. I always get in the weeds, but even just little short updates are valuable. You could even start off as a PSA. I'm sure all of your radio stations have public service announcements. You could even start incorporating little news bits as a PSA instead of a full news wrap. Oopsie daisies. Okay, so gathering news without a formal newsroom. I think DJs and volunteers are absolutely critical. Volunteer reporters, making media partners, finding out where you can get the press releases that are relevant to your community, using Zoom as a tool to record interviews, even the phone. Here at KPFA, we have a system where if someone calls the phone line, we press a button and it records immediately to our computers. There's a little tech you can get into, but even Zoom, honestly, even using your cell phone if you're out in the field, putting a wind sock like this thing here over your cell phone, finding the right space. Like I would say, anyone can be a reporter. On air calls from the community. Listening to the community is valuable. Obviously, not everything people from the community say are going to be news, but the community is a resource. And we'll get a little further into this. And partnerships with local organizations, fire departments, schools, nonprofits. So, training community journalists. So, I actually came from the world of anthropology. I was studying to be an anthropologist in college, and quite frankly, I ended up hating it. I was like, this sucks. And I was really at like a crossroads, right? I kind of felt like, you know, my I was diverging from what that field kind of believed, and my ethics did not align with anthropology anymore. But I anthropology and journalism are kind of the same thing. And I remember when I heard on KMUD there was an intro to community journalism class being offered at the station. I jumped on it. In fact, here, these are some links you can see. Let's see if it'll pop up. Here is a intro to community journalism project that KMUD helped to create. And it kind of just outlines, right, ethics and other guidelines. Let's see. There is a community radio reporter training manual from a West Virginia coalition of community radio stations. And I believe there's even one from Bend, Oregon, the handbook for the KPOV citizen journalism team. These are great resources. If you are unable to, dedicate the resources to creating your own, um, manual, please feel free to pull from these. These are available. I can put the links in the chat, or, feel free to use this and build your own. Another great thing, like I say, anyone can be a journalist, but this is a very handy dandy kind of code of ethics. Ethics, I think, are absolutely critical in the journalism field. And I love this beginning, seek truth and report it. Boom. I mean, that boils it down for you right there. And these are great little tools and rules to live by. And then, at KPFA, we offer multiple intro to journalism uh, interns on every year. And just to ensure that folks, as we're bringing them onto the station, they're becoming community reporters. We just always make sure that we have, our editorial guidelines, press pass policy, and making sure, as community reporters are representing us, they're doing so in a professional and ethical manner. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I love that you can share those in the chat. That'll be awesome.
Absolutely. So I'm going to minimize my screen here. Let me see if I can. Oops, exit full screen. Because I'm going to show you all sort of how I was making the news. I will give you a quick example of how to make a 30-minute newscast for free with one of our media partners. So here, having media partners is extremely important. The public news service is a great tool. I'll pull this up in a second after I kind of go through everything. But they have journalists across the country. If you sign up for their service, it's absolutely free. They produce a daily 6-minute newscast, a 3-minute kind of politics summary, and a weekly short newscast for rural America. And again, they have reporters in almost every state that produce a 2-minute story once a day. In California, it's Suzanne Potter, and we air Suzanne Potter almost every night here at KPFA. I know at KMUD, we did the same. And I'll kind of show you that too. We had Audio Port. That is our brand here where you can find resources. Let me go ahead and open Audio Port here. Lisa Loving, who's on this call, has been doing a great job and has been creating a newscast, kind of public affairs newscast that our affiliates are able to download free of charge as a part of your membership. And also here is our headlines. We have our daily headline summary. Right now, they're just under 6 minutes. They will be 5 minutes, and you can pull from that. You can pull to air as a headline at the top of the hour, bottom of the hour, or you could use that as you're building a newscast, right? Like let's say you want to make a 30-minute newscast, you can use that 5 minutes and embed it in your newscast. At KMUD, our script, we'd be like in national news. KPFA's Christina Onnestat shares the latest from Washington, right? And sharing the summary. You'll also see here something we're working to. This is a little bit of a sneak peek. We do produce an hour newscast daily. We tend to sometimes have a little bit of an emphasis on the Bay Area and LA. So our hour-long newscast broadcast to San Francisco Bay Area, to LA. But we really, for the most part, it's focused on national and international news. And I think it's still valuable for all of our affiliates. So this was a test right here. But
I
we,
I have a question about that, Lauren, if I may.
yeah,
Do you have rundowns or are these files just the sound files?
these are just the sound files. However, Ursula has given us access to a program called Otter. And for folks who are not familiar, Otter is amazing. It is an AI transcription service. It makes quick work of transcription. And we did a test run of that as well, and it works. Right now, we're just working to incorporate it into the daily workflow to also include a text rundown so folks can know what's going on. So stay tuned for that.
I see Terry has her hand up.
Go ahead, Terry.
Yes, Lauren, thank you for that. So we get KPFA headlines and play them Monday through Friday. And they're an excellent, almost 6 minutes. I wish they were 6 minutes instead of 5, but they're fine. They're really, really good. And they're not too local. In times past, because I'm in Kansas City, I'm in Kansas and Missouri. And in times past, I have had to cut a few stories because they were so localized where they were being made. And then Lisa, with respect to your community chat, is that just localized to where you're making it? Because I want you guys to know stations are downloading this and playing it every day. So thank you for that.
Can I respond to that really quickly?
Go for
What
it.
I put up there, I've been putting it up all year. A lot of what I've got up there is basically, it's designed to go with somebody's news broadcast. It's a public affairs, like was mentioned. And so most of the stuff that's up there is interviews. There's like expert interviews on specific issues. And you can go and take a look at it. And then within the past like 2 months, I've worked more to make it more like a standalone, like a public affairs, kind of a 30-minute broadcast. So it's going to have a larger interview. They're interviews with people, and then topical local news from other places that reflects what that topic was ideally, but it's in flux. And if you have any input or ideas, please let me know. I would love to hear what you have to say about it, but it's really designed to kind of go with whatever you might have going already, to be honest.
Great. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, I think I just want to add I think in answer to your question, Terry, they are local stories, but they're local stories of national interest.
Yeah, like when I first worked with Lisa, I saw a call on the Pacifica announce about, hey, are folks going to the No Kings rally in your area? Send us some audio from your report. So that was really exciting and really awesome. I appreciated the opportunity. To your point about the headlines, totally noted. I think there was a time KPFA, we added an additional headline hour to our broadcast that is specifically California. And so we're not including that in this headlines. Don't get me wrong, LA deployed to National Guard, Trump loses the lawsuit. You might see that on that headline report, but it's because we believe it's of national interest. But totally noted, when we're sending these headlines out, we know it's going to the national audience. To your point about 6 minutes, I think that's great feedback. As we've been talking about the length, we've gotten requests to be 5 minutes. We even got a request for 4 minutes. Our headlines are actually 7 minutes. So we're cutting this down for audio port. So this is good feedback.
Right. We have a board run community radio station, and we have had permission to play daily news, but at the end of a music hour. We have 30 some locally produced news and public affairs shows and use a few syndicated. So we have more than 30 on air, but these are not taking that valuable time. They're not that music time isn't valuable, but it's good because we have a transition between shows. So it works very well. It's good. Thank you for that.
And apparently we only have 20 minutes left because time is flying. So I'm going to try to hustle here and get to some of the meat of this. So one of the resources I really think is just fantastic, and this is how we created a 30-minute national news wrap. Like at KMUD, when we were making our 30-minute local news, we were trying to be as hyper local as possible. But I was nervous that we were becoming too insular, so that like aside from Democracy Now, that our listenership wasn't getting enough national news to get that, greater perspective. So we used it says California News Service. It's the public news service, and it is completely free to sign up. I believe they have collaborated with Pacifica in the past. You'll see here every day they have a 6-minute national newscast, 3-minute tracking democracy, the Yonder report. So every day, or I should say every Tuesday, creating our 30-minute public affairs, I would download the newscast. I would download 2025 talks. I would download the Yonder report and compile this, right? So that's a 15-minute broadcast already. You can pull from the archives.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, Lauren, but what you're showing, and again, to talk to Ursula and Stephanie, if you go back to the previous page, that's kind of, would make audio port really helpful.
Yes. And we've been talking about this too, and I even applied for a grant. So tell the Society of Professional Journalists to give us $15,000. Okay, yes, I agree with you. I love that interface. Okay, so you're like, great, this is 15 minutes of content, national content. I love it. What about the rest 15 minutes? So Suzanne Potter, she's the reporter for California. Again, y'all, this is absolutely free to public radio, community radio. All you do is email cans@newservice.org. You can give them a call. Totally free to broadcast, right? So this is Suzanne Potter. She is the California reporter. You're not in California, so check this out. These are all of the daily reports that have come in, right? And if you want to be specific to your region, right, you can go to topic. Here's the different topics: social issues, research, academic, health and wellness, environment, or the region. Let's go to the Midwest. What's happening in Kansas? Well, not a lot, unfortunately. But, from July, someone is talking about ending the EV tax credits. Southwest, Southeast. Okay, what's happening in Florida? Not as regular as California, but it's still a resource, right? So we're running into this issue, right? You have 15 minutes of your news. Randy, you're like, uh-oh, the last, news from Florida was in June. Now what do I do? So this is where I think KPFA is really great. And this is kind of what we did at KMUD as well. We create as much of the in-house news as possible, but we might have anywhere from like a 3-minute to a 15-minute gap that we still need to fill. And that's where I want to invite you all to check out the work we do here at KPFA. So I will go to our website, which now our website will be under construction, but you should always be able to go to kpfa.org/news. I know it says a lot up there, but if you just go kpfa.org/news, you'll see this, right? Okay. So here are our daily newscasts. What a lot of people don't realize is you can actually click our newscast here. And in it, here are everything that's hyperlinked are all of the stories we've produced in-house. This is a story I produced earlier this week. Gaza Freedom Flotilla sets sail to break Israeli blockade, deliver humanitarian aid. And all you do is you right-click, save audio as, Schmitt on Flotilla, boom. And then you just drag it to your, thing, and you got it. And there's so much, right? I mean, they are timely, right? We are a news department. We are covering a lot of timely things. For instance, 20 years after Hurricane Katrina, while you're making news, you might want to check our site daily and see, what we're covering to build your news. Our headlines are on Audioport right now. I'd like to also put them on our website. Stay tuned to that. And even on like Spotify, even though Spotify is recently been not the best friend to its content creators. Okay, but let's say you have an hour and you want an hour news. Here's our full news. And, same thing. Save audio as, download, boom. And I say edit as you need. I'd prefer you not to edit the individual stories within, but if you need to cut some of that content to fit your needs, I think that's totally fine. So, how do we build our newscast, right? Like that. And one other thing I didn't add in here, because I'm kind of thinking about like what we did at KMUD, we also utilized our partner, kzyx.org. They are a public and community radio station, and they had been producing a newscast, almost 1 6-minute daily newscast where they really just focused on one story. So I always knew that we had, 6 minutes of coverage for our Mendocino listeners. We had state and national coverage, and then we'd kind of build the newscast from there. So reaching out to some of your other area stations and seeing how you can partner, I think is also really valuable. But so now moving to us at KPFA, how do we make our newscast on, a smaller budget? as far as why we have so many reporters, it's because we're offering these intro to community journalism classes, right? We're giving and teaching people these skills, weeks of training, and then they sign up for a 6-month internship, and then we send them off into the world and they get really cushy jobs in the corporate media field. Just kidding. Anyways, okay. So how do we build our newscast? C-SPAN is our best friend. C-SPAN is a nonprofit media outlet, and they're live streaming. They even have clips, right? If you're like, Randy, let's say you're trying to make a headline, which eventually we should start talking about the quote unquote actualities or the clips we're all sharing for our headline reports. But let's say, you're building your own newscast and you want a clip of Health Secretary Kennedy, and you're like, oh my God, this meeting's 5 hours. This is a nightmare. What am I going to do? How do I know what the great clip is? C-SPAN makes featured clip. I mean, we ask our reporters to, listen to the whole thing, but when you're in a rush, you're on a budget, C-SPAN makes easy work of it. They have their clips. You could even go to their social media sites. This is all free to rebroadcast and share. It's amazing. C-SPAN is awesome. We cover a lot of international issues. And so the United Nations, they, on their website, it's pretty comprehensive. They also live stream. You can see their events and all other things. Native Voice One is great. They are also a nonprofit outlet. They actually, you do have to pay for their service, but it is extremely affordable. Before I left KMUD, I actually got to meet the folks from Native Voice One at the NFCB conference. They're awesome. And right before I left KMUD, I was like, hey, let's make sure we get more Native and Indigenous voices on our newscast. Joseph and Nat, you all know, like KMUD broadcasts to over a dozen sovereign nations, and having Indigenous representation on our airwaves is critical. And I think that can be said for all of our stations here. Native Voice One is a really great way to start filling that gap. I think we all need to do better, but I think Native Voice One is a great way to start. I can't speak for them, but I, explained the size of our station, our budget, and it was honestly the most approachable, affordable service I had come across, especially compared to the AP, where it is thousands of dollars to be a part of. We have a subscription. There could be a reality where maybe we at Pacifica have a Pacifica subscription and we can all share. Why are we all paying, right? Like right now in the Bay Area, there's a Bay Area day book, which if you're not familiar with the day book, I'll type it here. Let's see. Where, we look at the California or the day book or Congress, and this tells you all of the news items that are happening nationally or in your state. Like Congress, what's going on today? All right. Opposing the law enforcement surge, and it shows you the links where you can stream all of it's an amazing resource, but it is extremely expensive. I know not everyone can afford this service, but I think us at Pacifica, we should have, include this in some of our future conversations. They also have audio. Let me see if I can find, let's see, audio. And their reporters, oops, let me take Daybook out. Let's just
I see Davine has a question too when you're ready.
Davine, go ahead.
Oh, so on the C-SPAN thing, how do you go about getting the information or get the programming from them? Because back in the January 6 days, I was on their publications or their broadcast, the hearings, I was told that you couldn't rebroadcast those.
I can't speak to the hearing. Of course, you could we rebroadcast those. I know Pacifica, we're broadcasting that. I'm not.
So it's a little bit of a cheat. Basically, you can get that hearing from anywhere, but C-SPAN would charge you for using it right? So you can get it from C-SPAN, and if push comes to shove, you say you're getting it from someplace else,
Oh, I thought
right?
it was free to
Because
rebroadcast.
I don't think C-SPAN can be rebroadcast without their express permission. Um,
Perhaps I think we have an MOU, but I will have to double check.
oh, that could be. That could be.
But all of these hearings are going to be on the House website. Like we said, that daybook that features all of the links. If you go to Congress, navigate all of the different committees. But as far as recording, we just record off our screen. Like here, anything that's being played off the computer, we just grab. And there's also, I believe it's called the Creative Commons license. For instance, if we came into an issue one time years and years ago, whereas one of the Bay Area outlets had an exclusive interview and they played it, but they didn't cut it down to less than 30 minutes. If there's a Creative Commons license and a media lawyer could speak better to it, but it does give us room to air some of the content, right? With attribution. Always make sure to give attribution. If you don't give attribution, that's literally plagiarism. And by using, in part, right? You can't air an exclusive interview in full, but you could air a clip in part, give attribution, point people to where they can find it, right? But you can pull a little 20-second chunk to give people that information. Yeah, okay. Did I miss anything? For time's sake, I will just let you all know the National Weather Service is absolutely amazing. If you're not aware, every local area has its own 24/7 meteorologist. I'm not going to get into it right now, but you can reach out to me afterwards and I can help you find that information. But let's see, Stephanie, what's your zip code?
50010.
You can always see what's going on with weather. Weather.gov is incredible. The meteorologist here in California, we're like all on a first name basis. I literally hear their voice and I know who I'm talking to. And this is going to be an extremely important resource for us, getting that factual weather information. And, before the Doge cuts, they were staffed 24/7. Not all areas might have that 24/7 meteorologist anymore, but their main stations in the hubs should. And I can work with folks who want that information. Volunteer fire departments are amazing for local community radio stations. Often, whether it's the Forest Service or the state firefighting entity, a lot of times their hands are going to be tied on what they say and they have to follow chain of command. That's where fire departments come in. I don't know if you've ever heard people say, oh, yeah, evacuation zone E1020. What does that mean to people on the radio, right? We have no visual reference. What does this zone number mean? It means nothing. That's where volunteer fire departments who know that area know, oh, go and take, hop, skip road and da, 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 they know all the like local terms. And they're your friends and neighbors. So start reaching out to your volunteer fire departments. They're amazing. This is just in California, but your utility companies should, everyone's kind of like all high tech now, right? You can search outages, right? Like we have power safety, power shutoffs, right? Let's view the outage map. You can type in your zip code. There's actually an outage in Humboldt County right now, I saw earlier. I'm clicking on this. I'm like, okay, I want to let my listeners know the power is off. Oh, there's an unplanned outage. Let's see more. I'll go on air and I'll be like, according to PG&E, over 1,400 Humboldt County residents are without power due to an unplanned outage. PG&E expects restoration by da, 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 or whatever it says, and it's just a quick little community bulletin. And each state should have an interface like this for their utility. Again, if folks want help building their resource list, happy to help. Also, organizations, ICEs in your community. who's your point person? The feds. I've reached out for comment from the official source so many times. I've gotten no luck. But we've been leaning on our region's rapid response. They're the people on the ground. We're asking them to share their experience, right? And what's going on from their perspective. Social media has become a great tool. I like to follow The Guardian, Al Jazeera, C-SPAN, the local government entities themselves, which, by the way, go to your county's website, sign up for all of the alerts. Super important. You'll get press release, emergency alerts, etc. You can do the same, city councils, school boards, and just building those relationships with the local leaders and the movers and shakers. You can always create a news tip line for folks, to gauge what your community wants you to cover and, kind of give you a direction on some of your local reporting. I truly believe in collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. We on the North Coast of California have, built a news network, and we're hoping to continue to build that, right? And us at Pacifica, we're hoping to do that. We're all doing such great work, and I don't think anyone really has to reinvent the wheel, but I think we can all offer our contributions and use that collectively. Okay, so this I think is one of the most important elements, and I know we're running out of time. So emergency and breaking news. If I say about any of this is, sticks with you, please let it be the absolute critical importance, non-negotiable, how important having an emergency plan is. I'm going to go to this and try to go as fast as possible. This is a real photo from our community. Humboldt County, the North Coast of California, it has biblical plagues on the daily almost, or at least it did. And I'll note all of these photos are from 1 year. These are all photos we took in 2023. These were the emergencies we responded to. This fire was actually closer to Joseph's neck of the woods, the Smith River lightning complex. We had a lightning storm come through.
I don't see a photo. Does anyone else?
Oh, okay. Let me see. Hold on. Let me try again. Okay, how about?
There we go.
Okay, yeah. So this was from the Smith River lightning complex. This was one of the major highways that is now closed down. It is summer. It is grueling heat. A lightning storm rolls in, starts
Wow.
12 different fires. And we're jumping on the air, making sure the community is informed. So yeah, these are all photos from 2023. Preparing for an emergency before a disaster, like I said, people are going to go to the radio. Also, not to be a disaster capitalist, but anytime we have provided this up to the minute life-saving critical information, we have a surge of donations. This service brings members, right? People actually see the value. I always joke, you don't listen to the radio until you do, and you do during an emergency. So being prepared and being able to do that is critical. Again, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to show you some of the templates I've used to build our station's emergency preparedness and answer some other questions and, do some entry on local personnel from your area. Okay. Anyways, is your station prepared, right? Like, think about your physical station. Will you be on air if all hell breaks loose? Outages, wildfire, floodings, earthquakes. Simon Fresh, tech director at KMUD. We applied for a grant. We have a backup generator now at our transmitter site. Came in the nick of time because a month later we had the August complex, which was the 1,000,000-acre wildfire. Okay, what if you have to evacuate from, you can do all this stuff. What if you have to evacuate from your station, right? We have this Comrex. So, if someone needs to report from home or their van, KVMR, I think, had a disaster preparedness broadcast van. You don't need to get that high tech, but having a backup plan in place, transmitters. We did some fuel reduction around our transmitter site. We're going on about preparedness, but then, our station, if a fire came, we had, all this vegetation. So making sure practice what we preach, preparedness. Here's one of the many earthquakes we've experienced. This was at 2:30 in the morning, and we were live on air by 2:45 with an earthquake expert because we had done the work, we'd done the practices. It was muscle memory, and we provided an amazing response. We were on the air, like I said, 2:45. We didn't start receiving county alerts until 2 hours later, and the community was like, wow, KMUD is badass. People's during that earthquake, this is from Rio Del, 25% of that community we broadcast to, Rio Del's housing stock was totaled. That same year we had a crazy blizzard. We called it snowpocalypse. All of our major highways were closed, but we had built relationships with all of the road departments who were going live on air sharing these updates. That's my neighbor's house, roof collapsed. Here's just a wildfire, working with Caltrans, and knowing what other tools are available. Like I know I'm speaking to California right now, but what I'm showing, this is an app that's online through the state. Every single state should have their app, and it's just a matter of finding out what and but the information is out there. You just need to know how to get it. Here's a plane crash we had. Again, preparing before a disaster. Do you have an on-air response plan in place? Create, I heard some of you all say that you have a news committee. Maybe consider making an emergency response team and establish that chain of command. Who's in charge during an emergency? Is it the news director? Is it the station manager? Is it whomever is on air, right? Start having that conversation,
I see Marie has a question about how do you line up experts for on-call?
Yeah, and it's build right now. I am building my digital Rolodex of experts, and I'm reaching out before a disaster. I'm holding these emergency preparedness team meetings where I invite them to come speak to us so they can get a little familiar with us, know what we do. And, we ask, hey, if this goes down, can we call you to go live on the air? We had a tsunami warning across the entire West Coast a couple weeks ago. And the same tsunami expert of Humboldt County is also the tsunami expert of the Bay Area where I currently am. And she was from Berkeley, lives in Humboldt, and I was able to even call her and we go live on the air. And Nat, I believe you all spoke with her too. It was great. And we were able to share that resource. With that as well, establishing that relationship with emergency officials. So the Office of Emergency Services, the sheriff's office, or your police department, they have what's called a PIO, a public information officer. If you have anybody's number in your Rolodex, find out who that PIO is. It is literally their duty, their job to be that interface and share that information with you, member of the media. Elected officials, again, sometimes OES, sheriff's office, the firefighters, sometimes their hands are tied. Something we learned in Humboldt was one of our elected officials was getting a lot of this information, a lot of new developing information that the officials weren't sharing with the public yet. So we contacted the elected official who was able to kind of go outside of those barriers and share that critical information. Knowing who the infrastructure agencies are, firefighters, official, and volunteer. In California, we have federal lands, state lands, unincorporated lands. Who's in charge? Knowing that beforehand. And also having translators, right? Folks who speak a language other than English to make sure that when a crisis is happening, you can ask them to share that information on air as well. This is a funny photo because Lois here had just told this sheriff that her favorite song was I Shot the Sheriff by Bob Marley. And all the other guys go, well, you didn't shoot the deputy. I was like, my jaw was like dropped. Couldn't believe it. Preparing for disaster. So again, understanding the emergency. Where are you getting that official information? This is where, I mentioned, use the callers, use your listeners as a resource, but always verify that information before you go on air. Like we have amazing listeners, amazing community members. Some might be more credible than others, but one of my catchphrases is believe in facts, verify them first. And so always know where to get that official information, understanding that information, again, going to like the zones of evacuation zones. How are you able to disseminate this, right? Like here in Berkeley, we had that tsunami. I wanted to let people know, like, first of all, we are for the most part, in the clear, but in the event, if there ever was a tsunami, I was thinking, well, what language would I use to tell people where to go and how to be safe? So I reached out to our local OES and they were showing me the maps. And I was like, oh, okay, anything east of 6th Street is out of the tsunami zone. And they're like, exactly. So, I'm working out this language and kind of running mock emergencies and, getting clarification from officials. Disseminating information people can comprehend. While I'm hesitant to recommend AI, we had come into a situation where we were trying to translate into Spanish. And the person, we couldn't write fast enough in Spanish. We had it in English. So we asked ChatGPT, please turn this into Spanish. And then we had a native Spanish speaker read that. They were checking to make sure everything correct it was. So it kind of worked in a pinch to translate our scripts. Here's another like information tool. There is a national flight tracker, flighttracker.com. If there's a fire or a police chase or National Guard helicopters, if someone's a little below the radar, it doesn't show up, but there's another tool where you can kind of track flights. Here's an example of an evacuation zone map. See what I'm saying? Like SIS 1117, like that means nothing. But you would say south of Highway 96, south of Syed Valley. That makes sense to the listeners. Weather service, this was from that website, weather.gov. Lightning trackers, power outages. I put this in here, just not all fires, bad fire. Colonization kind of change that a little bit. This is Wailaki for good fire. And always remembering that sometimes officials use problematic terminology and trying to break that barriers. And again, another step of preparedness is joining a CERT, becoming a licensed ham operator, or seeing if a COAD exists in your community. Just a little extra preparedness level. And I am going to just super quickly wrap up this other presentation. And a part of this is having an emergency response document. This is something I helped to beef up. KMUD already had one in place. But we beefed this up. Talks about, on-air response, making some quick logos ahead of time so we're not scrambling. Emergency response flow chart so there people know what that chain of command looks like. I believe there's even scripts in here that we kind of, you can just kind of paste in the details, but just have these general scripts. Exactly. So, in case someone is, a little shy and, you just paste in that critical information, right? Your name, impacting this community, confirm there is a fire approximately blank anchors with blank containment. Evacuation orders are in effect for zones blank through blank. More, just kind of pre-scripts, preparing. I'm happy to share this. If folks want to use this to build off of their own emergency response documents. And again, I threw a lot at you in a short amount of time. Just remember, you can start small. And by doing that, you build, credibility and consistency. And don't be scared to apply for grants and the partnerships. There's a lot of people out there that recognize the loss of CPB is super, extremely horrible impact for many in the community. And so there's additional grants and partnerships that are starting to come online. We are 6 minutes over time, but any other questions for folks?
Wow, thank you, Lauren. That was so much great resources. Wow, just thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. I saw Davine, did you have a question or did you?
Yeah, I wanted her to share that emergency preparedness.
Okay, great. Ursula.
Yeah, Lauren, this is a general question, I know, but any thoughts you can share at the top of your mind about delegation of the labor? I was thinking about all these resources you gave about where to find different news clips and, information from different websites. Do you have any thoughts on how to delegate that work to actually make that happen when you have a very small group of people at a station?
Absolutely. So if your station is on air, right, you have a person, whether that's a music director, program director, or if it's just the general manager, uploading that content, right? Whether you're doing it in a cart or on iTunes, even. There's someone already in there potting in the content, right? But how much time do we have? For instance, if you go to Audioport and you use the headlines, that's a quick download, right? Or here in the future, if you want to air our newscast, okay, that's a quick download. You just plop it in. The time it takes for the public news service and built using KPFA and public news service, it takes me 10 minutes to make a 30-minute national newscast using public service and KPFA. It might take you the first time you do it, it might be 30 minutes, but I'm able to do it in 10. So but then past that, compiling from C-SPAN, compiling from the Associated Press, like that absolutely takes time. But if you are the general manager or the program director and there is some big national news going on and listeners are wanting to know more, these are some other sources you can use. Yes, they will take time, but you can take anywhere from 5 minutes, again, downloading an audio port, or 10 minutes using public news service. Lisa? Oh, you're muted.
So, okay, good. Good. I at KBOO, which is my home station, there's people out here. We are news junkies. What I heard in that question was, how do you delegate? How do you find people who will go and check these sources? People can do it from home, and it's your job to figure out like who is interested in collecting news. Is there something that interests the people that are in the building? And if you've got an all volunteer newscast, which is the ones that I've run the most, you get a community of people, you build that community of people, and you figure out like when people come to your volunteer training, what are they interested in? And you figure out like who is interested in climate change, who's interested in health, who's interested in these other things. And that's for content, right? But when you're talking about like, how do you systematically go and check all these sources in a timely manner, something that you could hand off to someone like Lauren was talking about. How about this one guy that's already doing the other things? KBOO's got a spreadsheet of every place that anybody needs to go to look for content. And so it can literally, like Lauren said, you can hand it off to people that have never done it before, and they can just literally click through the sources that you already have. But you can also, when you start getting regular people, if you're a volunteer newsroom, what I had and what happens at KBOO now is that every day there's a different crew of people. Some people are the same, and those people glom onto what they think is their beat. There's multiple ways to do it. And if you get confused, contact me or Lauren or somebody else. We would love to help you because everybody's newsroom really is different.
So Lisa, when you would incorporate these people who had a particular interest, say, how did you make sure that they were meeting ethical standards, so to speak? Do you do some sort of test or some sort of training
The first thing we do is everybody has to go through a volunteer training. Everybody has to go through a basic training to be in the newsroom. And then there's even an ethical training as well. I feel as if just to be a volunteer at KBOO, there's like a legal and ethical training just to be a volunteer. But honestly, it's really also important. You will, even if you don't have a news director, you're going to have to find somebody that takes responsibility for the news broadcast. And that, I mean, I don't even know what to say about that. It's got to be someone who can answer questions about it if something goes wrong. And the way it's worked at KBOO is there is a news director, there's someone there who can just look across the whole broadcast with a filter. But that is an issue. And one thing that we've talked about in the past in some of the trainings I've done is a self-editing checklist, right? You can do that in writing, you can do it in broadcasting, and literally make a list of all the things that you need to double check and check before you go on the air, before you publish your stuff. And that could literally be fact checking, and there's multiple ways to do that. But I had a volunteer once who he wanted to be a political manipulator. And the way he did that was he covered the city council and he would turn it into like an audio collage, right? Which is a weird thing to do. And I kicked him out because his attitude was, and he would say it to me, I want to impact, I want to harass these people. And that also goes to Lauren showed, I think it was the SPJ ethics list. Keep that close by, read it, and be familiar with it. And contact me if you've got questions. I would love to answer.
Yeah, it's complicated because a lot of the people that are in journalism are very passionate people. Like just to Lisa's thing about some folks having ulterior motives, like it's disheartening. We've had people that want to get out in the streets and protest, and I think that's great. But then they forfeit their right to be the journalist covering it. Because then you lose credibility as a person if you're unable to be neutral in your coverage. I'm very passionate about a lot of things, but I'm not going to be screaming, alongside the protesters while I'm out in the field. And we've had an issue in the past with that. And that's again while having that signing, that sheet that says I'm agreeing to this. These are the standards. And if someone breaks that, you said, well, you agreed to it, and now you've broken that trust in that agreement. But to the point of just not having the staff, you know, as far as making your own original reporting, I mean, that's going to take some time. But to start at the very basic function, like if you are, we're radios, like there's people already getting the content on the air, right? Like making contact or, you know, this way out and things like that. Like there's already folks getting that content of the air on the air. So, 10 minutes in their workflow of using the public news service or grabbing the headlines report or the individual stories, I don't see that being a big of a deal, but I know we all are inundated. There is also a automation. A lot of the things can be automated, like on audio port right now. Um, we're going to start uploading our 4 p.m. headlines on Audioport, and it'll be automated for our programmers. I'm not a technical wizard like some of y'all probably are, or like our lead engineers. But that's another question. You might want to ask, hey, can I automate the public news service to always air, here, 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 or on Audioport? With the age of AI, I mean, a robot could do it, and then it takes no staff time. I don't know if that answered the question.
I saw Greg mentioned in the chat about the resources are amazing, though he wishes he had more volunteers. That could be its own presentation, I'm sure, but I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that, Lauren.
Yeah, volunteers, I mean, time is precious, right? We all wish we had more of it. Um, here at KPFA, we have a really robust internship program where we're giving, training people on the skills of journalism and radio, and they're all extremely capable. Um, but it starts with creating that culture, that volunteerism culture, and putting it out there. I mean, we have a radio, right? We can announce that, volunteer trainings, but then also sometimes I realize like I've had, we've taught like intro to journalism at a high school in Humboldt County, but then the kids in the class really just wanted to learn more about radio. So then we kind of pivoted. And then there's been other times where the kids were actually really interested in journalism, which was great. So we were trying to network with local schools to get the kids involved. Like at Southfork, we had the kids compile, like we asked them to go into the public news service and like listen to the stories and compile their own newscasts and kind of practice. But it just depends on your capacity. If someone wanted to share like a specific situation to their station, I mean, we're happy to troubleshoot ideas, right? I think it's not a one size fits all approach, but there's different resources available to fit your needs, if that makes sense.
Any other questions? We're at 4:15, so we should probably wrap up soon.
Right. And if Stephanie, if everyone has their email, if you have folks' emails, I can send out all of these resources to
Yeah,
attendees.
that'd be great. If you send them to me, I can send them out when we upload the video.
That'd be great.
And I will go ahead. I put my phone number here and my email. If you didn't notice, I'm super passionate about emergency response. And especially in this era, I mean, the devastation we saw in Texas, the devastation in Asheville, and the lack of that timely information from the people who are supposed to be our sources has lit a fire under my butt. And I am willing to volunteer to meet one-on-one with stations and see what you currently have as far as, I could like help do an audit of your infrastructure, of your emergency response plan, and, help you start to build, at least give you an outline of the information you would need to find or help build those connections with the resources. But my form of protest in this time is making sure you all are equipped to keep your communities informed.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lauren, so much for taking your time today, and you did it under short notice too. And what an amazing time we got to have with you. Thank you. And Lauren Schmitt, she has a fire under her butt, and let us all go forth and have a fire under our butt from this day. And we'll share the documents with you soon. And thank you everyone for coming. And thank you again, Lauren. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lauren. That was great.
Thanks, y'all.